We have started recording.
Was it here last night? Yeah, last time. Oh, no, I thought it was here last time. There was no, you said last night. No, I said last. Oh, yeah. I didn't make it last time. All right, go ahead and call to order this meeting of the Anchorage Building Board. Start things out. Ken, would you be so kind as to do a roll call?
Certainly. Mr. Straight,
Present.
Mr. Fradine,
Present.
Mr. Cowling,
Present.
Mr. McCann,
Present.
Mr. Soboleski,
Present.
and Tyler Loken said he was out of town. And at this point, I do not see Mr. Boney.
All right, push that one. So by my count, that is 5 members, 10 out of 7 people that are currently assigned to the board. So that does give us.
And now to call for staff, I have Mr. Knopfinger,
Present.
Mr. Fosberg,
Present.
Mr. Dofa,
Present.
Mr. Hickle,
Present.
Mrs. Ovet, or Miss Ovet. Present. Mr. Harvey,
Present.
and Mr. Thompson.
Present.
All staff is available in person.
First up is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Move to approve. Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and call that approved. How about the minutes from our previous meeting on September 22nd? Those were distributed by Tana prior to this meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes? Approved. Have someone before a second.
It should be a bit, oh, pop.
Hello.
I'll second. A second. Any discussion on the minutes, any corrections or improvements? Hearing none, we go ahead and call those approved. Moving on, we have no new business, so that brings us right down to number 5, old business, which I believe is the reason we are here. Before we dive into this, I'd like to ask my fellow board members, how would we like to approach this evening? Speaking for myself, I have not been able to follow all of the correspondence that's gone on this. There's been a lot of activity, been a lot of discussion about where this is possibly going. My understanding is at present we do not have a modified ordinance. We have many pieces of discussion on it though. What do you guys think? How would you like to approach this evening? Open to you as well, Mr. Cowan.
I guess last time we talked about a lot of the different ordinances that have been brought up so far. Maybe if we first focus on the ones that we haven't talked about last time and at least get through those, at least the first cut, we can always circle back on the ones, so that we can at least get through all the proposed ordinances. Whether or not we actually do anything, finish up tonight or not.
I did see our meeting invite was slightly past 7:30.
But we also have Mr. Thompson in with us here today as well. So there's some additional.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind being able to go over kind of a response based upon your last meeting. This is Ron Thompson. Also, I think it'd be good to have everybody that's here that's not been introduced so far by roll call to introduce themselves. I know we have an assembly member, it looks like on board at least.
Let's start in the room and then go to the people on Teams. Sir?
Jason Fernandez, local 367. Patrick Reinhauer, local 367.
Josh, Local 367.
Ben Down, Local 367.
Bill Taylor, Collin Builders.
Okay, next up, Mr. Tony Jones.
Yes, I'm here, 367.
Okay, Mr. Whittleton. You may have stepped away. Mr. Hickle. There's a Ryan Andrew.
Yes, this is Ryan Andrew with the IBEW.
That is all that have not been put on the roll call.
Okay, I am not familiar with Local 367, so be so kind to.
We are the Forest Hikers.
Perfect. Thank you.
So just I wanted to first give a brief update kind of what's the status of the reorganization and building department in general that everybody normally does, just to kind of give you a heads up of what's been happening and what's in the budget and what the makeup of the organization is. So we reorged a little bit since this mayor came on. I was hired as building services director, and the main reason what building services director is going to be is over top of development services and over top of the planning department. And as part of the reorganization, all of the permitting functions within the municipality, if you permit anything with regard to 4700, is now in building services department. And that budget, I believe, is up in front of the assembly I think they've had the public hearings, and maybe Assemblyman Weddleton can say when they might be voting on that. I think they vote on it next week. When they vote on that, that makes the mayor's reorganization, I believe, finalized. That's when building services department will be created based upon that. Once that's created, then we can reorg all of the positions of where they go. So we pulled a few people out of watershed up in PM&E to put them in private development that's down in building in development services, because they're the people that handle the permitting. So we brought the permitting function down. So one entity and one group. So one group can actually anybody that needs to do anything with regard to permitting can come to one person if they wanted to. So that would be the building services director. So we're trying to streamline the process so everybody knows they can go to one place. Part of that reorg also means we're going to bring a traffic reviewer out of traffic department and put them into zoning, because the zoning review is done for Title 21, right? Traffic review is out of Title 21. So we're just bringing those and making an extra person down in the planning department to be able to handle the plan review for traffic and zoning. So in the future, really soon, you won't route something to planning or zoning and to traffic. It'll just go to zoning. And so it'll take away one extra entity out of the process, but still get the full review of everything to do with traffic and zoning and everything. So that's happening. There's 2 inspectors right now that are upstairs in PM&E that do road inspections, and then we have right-of-way in development services. And so the right-of-way, these 2 inspectors that do public development type of inspections, but the same road inspections as right-of-way does, they're just being combined into one larger inspection section, so it's all consistent inspection for roads, whether it be private development, right-of-way renovation, or new public roads. So we're kind of putting them in. So then during the winter, we can gain some efficiencies with regard to more inspectors out there handling snow removal as well. That's what right-of-way inspectors do during the winter. So there's these, and then all of the financial organization for building services that's been under development services is now moving under building services, but we're also still in discussion of the possibility of moving them in with community development, because building services is going to lie within community development department. Therefore, if we can put all the financial in one area, they cover all the departments in that area. So again, trying to efficientize and consolidate and be able to have multiple people do multiple things. So we're trying to do that. Part of some of the things that we went on lately is that we've also been trying to right-size the organization. The organization has been losing approximately $1 to $2 million a year. It's unfortunate that the Building Safety Reserve Fund has been going negative. The whole point is trying to set fees so it doesn't go negative. It's trying to at least break even, but we've been losing upwards of $1 to $2 million a year over multiple years. The Building Safety Reserve Fund is sitting at negative $12 million. We need to get that turned around, get it at least evened out and right-sized, and be able to not be, we're paying interest. So all the building permit fees that we're paying on $12 million worth of interest right now. We need to get that to level and then start getting that back paid off and get that cleared up and try to move toward a time that the building safety is actually self-supporting, because it's not right now. Unfortunately, when that happens and right sizing happens, that means one of two things. You either lose people by attrition or you have to deal with layoffs. It's unfortunate, but we've had to do some layoffs in the course of the last month or so. We laid off an electrical inspector. We laid off 2 mechanical inspectors. We've laid off a front counter person position. They actually left, but we're not rehiring that position. And we're looking at everything that we do with regard to our organization to make sure that we don't continue losing money. Now, when we do that, we look at all of the basis of workload and all of those type of things. We were averaging about 4.5 inspections per day per inspector. We had to, typically the national average that I always dealt with for 20 years prior to my time here has always been 8 to 12 inspections. Somewhere that 8 to 12 a day is usually the national average for doing inspections. We were doing 4.5 based on the staffing that we were at. I think most people would look at that and say, well, geez, if it was a private company, you would take and right size that and you would about double the staff that you really needed. We didn't drop it to less than half the staff, but we did lay people off. It's unfortunate that that happens, and it's unfortunate that we still have to look at it. Part of that's in the budget as a requirement, but part of that's outside the budget that wasn't notified in the budget, because we still, whether the budget is there or passed, we still need to obligate ourselves with fixing things and trying to correct it now rather than later. We just don't have the number of inspections coming through that we were having before, and we don't have the workload to be able to support that. But we monitor it, and we also, and I've talked to staff and talked to many people, and I had to face the people I laid off and said, you know, they're valuable people, right? They're valuable employees that have a lot of knowledge based on once they're trained as an inspector, it's an unbelievable value to the city. The problem is if we don't have the work, we don't have that, but we will get the work. We will get it again. It will come back. And I promise them, as soon as when we monitor this, when we get the numbers back up to where we hope they would be, then we will hire staff back at that time. And those people are usually the ones that are best qualified and usually the ones that get dispatched and usually are the ones that are hired to redo it. It's just a tough time right now for a little while trying to right size our organization, get it to the right point. So that kind of gives you a brief history of kind of what's happening at the building department and what we're going through and trying to get us in a place that we're at least breaking even. As you probably know, anybody that's a contractor knows that the muni or the mayor a year and a half ago had placed a 25% reduction in permit fees. Well, that 25% reduction amounts to, when you're at 25% of $7 million revenue, you're talking almost $2 million that you lose by doing a 25% reduction. So part of that refund took place in 2020. Part of that took place in 2021. We feel in 2022, we will find out that the fee increases that were done in 2020 are adequate or not. And so hopefully we feel they are adequate and we'll start being right size and we'll start that pattern in the right direction. But until such time, we have to make moves. And although we don't like to see people leave, and it's probably the worst part of this job. I went through it before. I laid 38 people off years ago when we went through a down cycle. I also hired people on advanced staff when we do, and we anticipate to do the same thing now. We have to just get a handle on this budget and make sure we quit just losing money, because the money's not there. We're borrowing it, and that affects the municipality's bond ratings because that money is being used out of some other fund somewhere as interest, as a loan to building safety while you go through it. So it's unfortunate, but it is real. And hopefully, at some point people understand that that's what we're trying to do. We're not just trying to lay people off to lay them off. It's a real problem. Anybody that owns a business would do the exact same thing and probably faster than we did it, because it's really unfortunate that we're in this very negative budget cycle that's been happening for at least 5 years now in this department. So hopefully that helps the building board kind of understand the building side of things and what's going on. I mean, with that, I'll ask questions about that, then I'll head on to the code things that have any questions.
Before you say anything, if you're on Teams and have not muted, please do so. Thank you. No.
One thing I'd like to do before we dive into the details of this, I'd like to ask the gentleman from wrote this down because I know I was going to forget it. 367. Which item are you here to talk about? I want to make sure we respect your time and get your input.
Oh, I mean, we're mostly just here, I think, to kind of see where, you guys are heading with the licensing requirements of the municipality.
Okay.
Specifically, how about you guys?
The air emissions valves. That's going to be one thing. A couple of these guys are line instructors. I'm the training coordinator over at Local 367. And I'm going to have to answer to our membership as to why we're allowing these valves. They want to know. I got contractors from Mountain Meadow. Are they reliable or responsible if there's damage done? If the sink backs up, the air emissions valves underneath, are they liable now for that installation? Or if a private entity is inspecting it, it's a private entity now responsible. That's some of the questions I'm hearing. I just want people to tell them what I heard.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Taylor, do you have any specific items you're here?
Not so specific, just general.
Okay. Gentleman on the line from IBEW, is there a specific item you're here to speak about?
No, sir, not here to speak about any particular item. I am particularly curious to see what the board decides to do with the, in particular, the modification for exemption for permit for LED retrofitting, as well as the proposed exemption for GFCI protection in garages. So, thank you.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Thompson, I'll turn it back over to you. I would ask, first of all, if you could give, since you were not here last time to speak to this, could you give a high-level overview of how this ordinance came together?
Yeah.
And then dive into your discussion.
Yeah, the high level of the reason why ordinances are usually created is because two things. One, the industry wants a change and asks for that change. Two, the assembly wants a change and asks for that change. Or three, the administration asks for a change or wants a change. This is a combination of, I don't think in any of these, the assembly asked for specifically. So there's no real request that the assembly put forward. So this was assembly put together. When I came in, I asked, you know, as a director coming in, staff, do you have any issues you want to put forward? Building official, do you have any issues you want to put forward? And in that case, I got a list of items. And so I looked through that item and I could kind of, as I go through this, kind of tell you how it kind of sometimes specifically, it's more important about how specifically they are rather than in general. But in general, they either were requested by industry, requested by staff, or requested by myself. So that's what I would say, that that's kind of how they're generically put together. I would say when I say staff in this case, I would say in the most part, I thought initially it was staff, like staff in the inspection area or plan review area, but I'm more saying staff by building official in this case because he brought many of these changes. But I kind of assumed early on that that was a group of staff that he had that helped put them together. And that was Bob Dole. And so he presented several of them to me. I thought they were, that's why we've kind of pulled back a little bit and then went back to staff. And I've been meeting with staff on several of these to understand them because I thought initially that staff had helped bring them forward. But I did find out that several, I brought 2 of them forward and the rest were basically things that were done financially or in the administrative code to help us administer the code better, because the administrative code items usually are brought forward only by the administration. They're never developed in a code group. They're never put together that way. Most of these changes are administrative code changes, but very few are really truly down in the code books. And so in the administrative code, it's up to the administration usually to try to see things, to clear them up. And so as I go through the ones that you had questions on, you'll understand I tried to explain exactly why they were brought up, why we thought about bringing them up. And at the same time, I mean, we feel good about what we put forward. That's why there has not been a change in code brought forward. You mentioned a change in the ordinance. We feel that most of them are good. And what I want to do is go over and kind of tell people why, and then you guys can decide whether or not you agree with that. But at the same time, when it's administrative code items, we typically, those administrative code items are usually all put together by administration and not by committee. So that's why I did see a lot of emails going back and forth. Why are these all put in without committee? Well, the admin code is almost always developed only by the administration and put forward and part of the code. So hopefully that helps. Okay. So anyway, we'll start with the first one that really has 4 or 5 implications, and the implications happen to be because of financial reasons or code reasons. So this issue came up. I asked Bob Dole if he could extend the length of time to get licenses from 2 years to 5 years. And he came back after he went and analyzed it and came back and told me that he feels like all we do is verify the state license. We take their money, verify the state license, and issue them a new card and a license and charge them $400. And that's been a kind of a roundabout, it's been over and over. When I was building official here before, many contractors, many journeymen, many apprentices have come in and said, you guys are just taking our money just to give us a card for no real reason, no special reason. And we already have to have a state license. So we're not, the whole implication of trying to do this, and after listening to Bob, I kind of agreed with him, because it was something I had heard many years ago for the 15 years or 12 years I was building official before. And my view is there's also a requirement in the city when you charge fees, you're supposed to charge fees for the costs that the fees are supposed to be representative of the work that is caused by that being done. Realistically, we make a check to the state licensing board. And if you have a journeyman license, besides plumbing mechanical, and that's different, I'll get into that in a second, they do specific testing, but electrical does not. There's no special license in the city for electrical journeymen. And so we rely all on the state with regard to contractor license, administrator licenses. All we do is verify that. Once they verify that and they've got their state license, then we can issue them then we typically issue them a license. Then we issue them a permit because of that license. And all we're saying is we can just check that state license, make sure you're active in your state license. And when you're active and licensed and adequate in your state license, we can issue a permit. Still doesn't mean you can't, you have to do everything right. You have to do all of the codes right. You have to do all of your work correctly. But you don't have to pay $400 to the municipality to get that extra license. That's what this is about. I've seen back and forth commentary about, we need to have that extra license because we can enforce without a city license. We can enforce a person to have that state license and go get that state license, or they don't get a permit. So we have the same enforcement ability. We just don't take their money to get that license for the city. Now, it was up to me to prove that what would that cost the city to do that? Because basically it's just a loss of revenue, right? It's the same exact safety level, except loss in revenue. That loss in revenue is about $280,000 a year. So 560 over 2 years. So we're collecting $560,000 to print cards for contractors and monitor that we have a second license for those folks. I don't know if that feels really fair to me. I feel like in a time that people are coming out of a very tough financial time with COVID and all that, that this is a good choice, that we can still keep the safety, we can still keep the security, we can still keep our ability to issue permits only to licensed contractors. We just let the contractors, the journeyman, the apprentice, keep their money in their own pocket and put that toward their training, put that toward their business, and that's what this is about. Now, it has been brought up that, okay, the plumbers, we give them a test and they learn the local amendments. But those of you that know me before, I used to have training sessions all the time. We used to have luncheon sessions. We would bring 1-hour training sessions for people. My view is that's what I think we should be doing. Come back, retrain. If we need a bunch of apprentices, we can offer our services to the union. We can offer our services to them to go teach them the local amendments, teach them those things. But right now we're taking contractor licenses, money from contractors that have been in business for 30 and 40 years. And we're taking $400 from them, or whatever the fee ends up being each year. They just raised it 2 years ago, just to give them another card that says they're licensed again. My feeling is, let's keep it in their hands. We can keep the safety, we can keep the insurance, and we can train the local amendments, and we'll get the same exact service that we're getting now. But that's $560,000 that gets to keep in their hands. Us, we feel like in 2022, when the fee increases that were in place and the adjustments that we're making to right size our organization, we have that covered. We don't feel like we will be negative and lose money, and we don't then have to maintain plastic card covers, maintain the cameras, maintain all of those things. We can, people get their state license, and it's constant that people say, I am licensed, and they all bring in their state license, forget they have a city license, and then all of a sudden, you got one lapsed or the other one lapsed. We're just trying to make it simpler and make it easier. And at the end of the day, we hope that you guys follow that same thinking that we're looking at. The next one is,
Tom, if I could, before we move on, rather than having you read through all these and then us come back, let's go ahead and talk about this one, since we're on this. Personal board comments, questions from Mr. Thompson on this issue?
To the chair, Mr. Thompson, so the union is going to get into training now?
we've always done training. We run the backflow preventer training. He does that.
I do administer back full classes here.
And we administer tests for all the,
time and testing and such, yes.
You said training,
But not for,
there was
jury
one.
components and sheet.
no, what I'm saying is if the unions asked, they wanted us to go present what the local amendments mean, we could go over there and present a class on the local amendments to the plumbing code, absolutely.
Well, that's why we have the UPC.
Right, correct, I agree. But we have local amendments to those, and the argument has been, oh, we need these journeyman licenses and we need these apprentices licenses because we need to train them how to handle the local amendments. And I'm saying, if that's what we really need to do, and we need to charge them the money just to do the local amendments, well, we should be able to provide that local amendment training to whoever those people would be on a periodic basis. And we used to do periodic training all the time. We can do handouts, we can do all kinds of things with regard to helping people understand things, absolutely.
Well, we already have, IAP.
Correct, they could do that too.
There would be no cost. I understand we're trying to save some money, so. I'm seeing that one. Go. That was my point.
Through the chair, we are still lead plumbing and mechanical inspector. I do want to back up just a hair as far as state license requirements versus municipal license requirements. As Ron mentioned, that we're going to be looking into, relying on the state to cover all the license fees and all the enforcement. But state of Alaska does not have any enforcement. They're extremely understaffed as far as field inspectors and code enforcement officers. And as I mentioned in the past, that this is a vetting process for the municipality of anchors, plumbing, mechanical contractors, and sheet metal individuals and things like that. That's what we use, and it's again our examinations are based on climatic amendments pertaining to the adopted codes. So that's how we regulate all the contractors and individuals within the business service area, and I feel that that's important to charge that fee, to administer the examination, and just to make sure that these individuals and contractors are aware of our local requirements. And I think that the state already really would not be able to have a handle on everything that we deal here within the municipal business service area.
If I may ask a
It's
question,
a huge task.
if I may ask a question in response to that, how does the city handle enforcement of that right now?
We have 3 code abatement officers, and we also have all the other departments have the ability to, they check for licenses and be able to issue notice of violation requirements. That all goes for all disciplines, plumbing, mechanical, electrical, and structural.
But how do you, when somebody does do something that they aren't supposed to, how is that caught? Is that caught through the inspection process?
Correct.
Would that still happen even if we didn't have licensing, specific licensing?
Yes and no, because actually a large percentage of it, we get people call in, it's driven by complaints. That is a huge percentage of it, because a lot of it could be done privately or residential wise. But yes, there are some of those things are picked up at the time of inspection. Yes, on permitted work, correct.
And
But the majority of it is complaint.
is complaint driven, but those are complaints from citizens, not people
Correct.
within, okay.
Through the chair, Mr. Sobolewski, that was one thing we brought up last time, which was the current verbiage that is associated with these items here deleted everything, including your ability to enforce that, is the way it's currently written. The paragraphs that were stricken from regulation included their ability to enforce. And so that was one thing we brought up last time, is if you want to do this, you might want to actually keep in the municipality's ability to enforce licensing still in the state. But of course, we have no teeth. That would end up coming to the assembly.
The intention is exactly what you're saying, Craig, to keep the enforcement. If
Yeah.
those were written incorrectly, then you're absolutely right. We need to fix that because the intention was never to stop any enforcement. And we will not, we have the same enforcement. It will stay the same after this, regardless of this. And so I agree with you if that's the case. It's been a while since I looked at the exact language of that. I didn't think we did strike the enforcement part.
It looked like it. Oh, we don't have the entire thing, just what was printed out, and there was definitely verbiage in there about enforcement that was in this.
100% intended to continue the enforcement that we have with code abatement, with inspection, including complaint driven, because those go to the code abatement staff. And that staff is fully capable of handling all of that.
Through the chair, this is Sandra Ovitt, and I'm head of licensing. And I still believe we need to have the licensing on our site, at least for the companies, so that, because I have to go on there and verify if they don't provide the state license. I have to verify that, make sure that the administrators link to it, and then that they have all the pieces of the puzzle together. It's still going to have to be put into our system, the permitting system, so that the permit techs know that the company is actually properly licensed for that permit to be issued. That's still going to have to be maintained no matter what. So we're still going to have to do all the work to get it in our system. So there still should be some type of a fee. Whether, I mean, 400, I've always said that's a little excessive myself. I mean, it used to be like 280, I think, when I first started, and now it's up to 400. I mean, we could totally reduce the fee, but we still have to be able to look at the state website, make sure that they're accurately licensed, and put them into our system in order for them to be issued a permit. And then I get notified monthly from the state. Somebody there sends me a list of everybody that they've done a stop work order and a cease and desist to, and then I do it on our side. So all that's still going to have to be maintained.
So to be clear, the work you're talking about doing, is that when somebody is licensed or when a permit is?
So they have to be properly licensed in order for us to issue the permit to that company.
And the process you're talking through right now, you go to the municipality matrix system. Could that process work by going to the state of Alaska system?
No, we have to input the same company information into our system in order for us to issue the permit.
With the current system doesn't mean we have to. We can always just go to the state and verify.
But it still has to be uploaded into our system.
It's just a matter of in our software system, we have checks and balances, right? And right now it's set up based upon the code. So we would just reconveying that process to meet whatever the next code is. We do it every year and we change and update anything. So if the event that whatever it is, even if you were to change it and say, hey, we really like this licensing and you guys would rather see it at 100 rather than 400, right? We still would have to go edit that system every year and change whatever that number is and change those licenses every 2 years. Every 2 years. Or, so no matter what, that's just a byproduct of what we would do and how you set up your system. Just like anybody would set up their software to follow whatever code system you have in place. So we would just set up whatever is needed to be the most effective and efficient. And I don't know what that would be until we change the code. That's what we go through that on a monthly basis. We're changing our software monthly, right? Because of decisions, policies, code, or whatever, assembly to ordinances, whatever happens, we're always changing that. And like any company that has software for what you do, you change it based upon your process rules. And so if the rules change, we would change it to match that.
So regarding this section, we just talked about how much in a deficit the department is, and that you have 4 less staff. Potentially, are you done laying people off, or is there more people who are going to be laid off? are you set now?
There's more people, more positions being looked at the present time, yes.
Okay, so if.
But it's
we're-
because of workload. It has nothing to do with, the layoffs come to workload, right? Have nothing to do with the budget, the revenue. We're not doing it based upon that. We're doing it on workload. And if the workload is there, they stay. If the workload is not there, we have to make the tough decision. And at the end of the day, we feel like when we make the final decision and we get the department right sized, this will not affect our budget.
Including the 12 million that we're currently in debt.
Well, the 12 million will be over time. It's not, we're not going to make up 12 million. When you only make 7 million a year in revenue, you're not going to make up 12 million for multiple years, right? So, but the building safety fund, the 181 fund, is a self-supporting fund that's just for Anchorage Building Safety Service Area. It goes up and down. Sometimes it goes, sometimes you lose money. And what it's there for is that fund is there. Hopefully you want to be in the positive, right? So then when you grab in and you get a bunch of permits, you get all that money up front. Then if the permits slow down, then all of a sudden we still have to do those inspections, right? So you maybe not taking more revenue in, but you're keeping your funds there so you can cover the inspections to get through that next 6-8 months worth of inspections. So, and so that's when, and then the same thing in the reverse. As we get more building permits, our building permits are on the decline, right? And our inspections were on the decline. We're 85% of last year, and last year was 80% of the year before. So we're on this decline. As you go down, hopefully you used to be able to have money in that reserve fund to cover you in those bad times. And then in the good times, you make enough to cover and have some money for when you go back into the bad time. It goes up and down and up and down. It's been that way since the beginning. And so it's our job to try to keep and pick what we feel based upon the economics of the time, what that future is. The 5-year ADEC future right now is predicted flat, right? So we're basing our information that we think our permits will stay flat at this rate. So we're trying to right size the organization based upon that, but willing to be able to make the change and go back up if fees go up, if costs go, or if revenue goes up, permits go up. But right now it's on its way down, but they said it should even out and flatten out. So we're kind of going on that. It's always slightly a guess, but at the present time, we were losing too much. But as I said, we were losing too much the last 2 years because of the 25% reduction that was given on the fees. When that 25% reduction is no longer given, we start getting closer to being right size, and we can cover this as well as make our business work with regard to the level of staffing that we need to do the job.
Okay.
When this is done, Mr. Hickle has his hand raised.
So I guess I hear two different stories where we're low, but yet we want to reduce our revenue. And just to be clear on this is $200 a year for a contractor. I spend $600 a year sending my LLC business license to Delaware, and it costs 1 cent worth of electrons for them to transfer the money. $200 for any contractor a year is, my guess, is peanuts. I spend more on that in a coffee shop every year. All the engineers and architects, we are about to give $150, most of us already have. And I've spent 8 years on the ADLS board. It doesn't cost $150 for them to take our money. What that does is that pays for our state inspector, that pays for our office staff, that pays to support the ADLS board for 2 years. That's the only revenue.
So you're saying add the license for a mechanical engineer for Anchorage as well?
If it's the cost of doing business and it's $200, heck yeah, I pay. Most of us all spend, every city, we spend $25 to have a business license over there to do business. It's
usually
now,
one, the problem ends up being is here we're doing it two for the same thing. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
My view is it's your guys' opinion at the end of the day that you get to bring forward. We think as an administration, this is a sound and proper decision making that we don't lose any safety. We don't lose, and we feel the $280,000 a year that we would lose is more than made up when we get past the 25% reduction that has been done.
Well, so there's the contractor licenses, which again seems to me very little in the cost of doing business and how many hundreds of thousands, if millions of dollars the contractors make every year. Now, as far as the individual licenses, I don't think, I am in total favor of reducing the individual licenses that, you know, frankly, mechanical is the only one that gets hit for it. Now, to cover the cost of the test, yes. But the annual individual, I don't think you guys should be spending $175 to have your journeyman license every year. To me, that should be the cost of doing business because you're not making $1 million a year as your company is. And most of your guys, your companies are paying for your licenses anyways. So by us reducing down the annual licenses for the actual gas fitters, pipe plumbers, and sheet metal, in essence, does provide a savings for mechanical contractors because most of them cover their employees. But I mean, that would be my opinion as the mechanical on the board, I think. But also, we as a group, we've seen from NSTAR, they want to keep these licenses. I see very few, and I really want to hear from you guys. I see very few people saying that we do not want to have those tests and those licenses in Anchorage because NSTAR said they're specifically against it, saying that they have far fewer life safety issues here in Anchorage because of those tests that you guys take and making sure you are competent in it compared to Matsu, compared to Kenai. So, I mean, that would be my opinion, but I just don't see the need in reducing our revenue when we're laying off people at the same time and also trying to offset a $12 million deficit. Doesn't make sense, logic sense to me.
Mr. Hickle first.
Yes, we have Mr. Hickle on the line with his hand.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
This is Don Hickle. I'm the Chief Structural Inspector. I also am the head of the Code Abatement Inspectors who inspect the license requirements for the structural section. The licensing requirements, I think we're missing the point here, is to keep the contractors in their lane. We've got contractors doing plumbing, mechanical, and electrical work that aren't licensed to do any of it. The code abatement guys have cited these guys. And this $200 a year ensures that the roofing contractor, who is not a general contractor, cannot do framing work. The rehab contractor that can do rehab work and is licensed as a general contractor can't do the plumbing, mechanical, and electrical for the bathroom remodel. So the $200 a year is the cost of doing business, and throwing out this $586,000 a year that the city charges, every contractor in this room and in the city should embrace this to make sure that guys are not crossing the line. And thank you.
So what's the follow-up question?
Sorry, so just to clarify, total number of active inspectors now within the municipality of Anchorage, we have 3 municipal mechanical inspectors.
4.
4 total.
Yeah, 4. Plus, including myself.
Okay, and I noticed on the state of Alaska employee directory, there are 2 specific plumbing inspectors that would make a total of 6 individuals capable of inspecting the systems within
That covers
city of
state,
right.
statewide, correct?
So just in our area, there would be 6 total people that were able to do that work for 300,000 people within the municipality. So that seems like a very disproportionate amount.
Doesn't seem that it's manageable
Yeah.
number of individuals covered such a large area with a lot of construction happening, correct?
Right.
I've got a question on that one. What's the average time for inspection? Well, I heard that it's 8 to 12 inspections a day average nationally. We're getting 4. Does that include traveling back and forth to job. I know it's a half hour to go across town.
It's gonna be a little bit different here, especially during the winter months, you know. I always figured, say, anywhere between 50 and 20 minutes travel between job sites. And, you know, depending on whether it's an underground inspection or a rough or a final, you know, it could vary anywhere from 20 to 45 minutes. You can do an hour, depending on whether it's a double, meaning a plumbing and a mechanical inspection. So we could roughly say about an hour for each inspection.
It's travel time, everything.
Yeah, correct.
I'd like to ask our folks from 367 here this evening, what are your thoughts on the permitting, or the licensing discussion? What is your position on it?
Me personally, I have no problem paying fees. I would rather everybody have licenses, like Mr. Hickle said, stay in our lane, and we're being verified that we're doing our work and not other people's work. I mean, I live in the valley. That's the Wild West out there. I mean, I've seen some of the god-awful stuff done out there. You know, carpenter putting in plumbing. I mean, I've got stories with these air admittance valves of putting them in the attic space. Once you get them up in the attic space, that's warm, moist water that's collecting in the cold space. Once it melts, it's going to soak all your insulation. Not only that, but now you got mold. I've found houses where they're boiling out underneath the sinks because the dishwasher backed up and there's nowhere for it to go. It's under the flood level brim of, no vent should be under the flood level brim of a vessel. You're putting it under a flood level brim. That's one of my biggest things that I'm hearing from contractors, but if we don't have licensing and it's not being enforced, then what's the use? I mean, I have no problem paying fees. I would rather everybody pay fees and be accountable. That's my take.
If I could piggyback off you a little bit, Jason, the UPC is more of a national code, whereas our muni amendments related to Alaska, which is very different from many of the other states down south, which is why it's so beneficial to have it. Just add that in there.
Our gentleman online from IBEW, I'd like your input on this too. Do you have thoughts, either personally or on behalf of IBEW?
You know, I would agree with what's been said before. I personally support the additional licensing here in the municipality. I think it's important. Yeah, I would not support getting rid of that requirement.
Thank you.
If I may, through the chair.
Yes, sir.
Would also like to add, you know, we made some notes here, you know, the State of Alaska Examination Office, you know, tests on general comprehension application of plumbing and mechanical, you know, and here, I administer those examinations. That includes waste and vent sizing, water sizing, gas pipe sizing, and things like that. Those are the everyday installations that, you know, that they install. And I also feel that gives the homeowners the insurance that a licensed contractor and their employees are familiar with the local codes and standards here. And that's the sole purpose of these examinations and licensing and fees and requirements that we have that developed here and set before us.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask, but when they do that, it's only the very first time they do it and never again, correct? One time.
That is the initial time when they pass, correct. But it's
So
license
every,
labs.
so if someone took that 40 years ago and come get the license, they pay the fee, they get no training, they get nothing for that local amendment.
Continuing
They
education is required.
only got that, but that's required by everybody anyway. By every single person, by all of our
Any
licenses.
discipline trade, yes.
I'm just asking one question, because I mean, I'm trying to understand some of it to make sure why. This is, just to tell you, this is one of the most heated and most brought to my attention both before I was here at the city and when I was away from the city, and the first thing I came back to the city was this issue. And my request was, let's take it to 5 years rather than do it every 2 years, right? Just to kind of speed it up. I'm not 100% worried about whether or not you guys decide to take this out or not. I think it's a good thing to do, but that doesn't mean that it has to be done, right? I mean, I'm part of what I'm doing is supposed to streamline the system. That would just be streamlining it. Yes, it costs us money. I think we have it covered, but if you choose not to, you choose not to. It's not super, all these code changes were put together because somebody wanted them. Most of the time, many people wanted them. Many people, and this is one thing just to say, many people do not come in front of municipal employees that are in charge of doing their inspections and go against what they want done, correct? Because they feel retribution can happen. It's a really tough scenario. It's very difficult to see, very difficult to happen, but it's real. And I noticed it when I was on the outside for 6 years, and I noticed it. And that's one thing that I try to do, is try to see if we can set things up to not be able to go and have those things. I know for a fact there is many contractors that would want to testify, but they won't testify in public because of the fact that the people that they're testifying against are people who are going to write up their comments for the future in the field. It's just reality. So at the end of the day, we suggested something. The building board can take this out. I have zero problem with that if that's the decision making. I'm just saying, as a request to the community, I'd put it forward, and I think it is no less safe. We can cover the money, and it doesn't cause a problem. I just don't think we give enough service for it. If it stays in, we will probably train more. We will do some things with that money to make sure that it happens, because I don't think we're doing what we deserve with taking that money from people's hands. Because it's 200 here, 200 there, 400 here, 500 here, $1,000 here. There's many permits and many fees that people pay with us to the city. Some of these people have 4 or 5 licenses. They don't just have one, they have multiple. So anyway, I just want to add that and just say, you guys have the discretion to decide that. If you don't want it, don't feel bad on our part. Make a decision that you guys feel is right for the community of Anchorage. So with that, I don't know if we have any more. We can move on to the next issue.
Thank you for the discussion. I'd like to close down the comments on this. Oh, sorry, we got one more comment. Yes.
Okay, I was just thinking it's kind of simplified and dumbed down, but from a tradesperson's perspective, if you take away the licensing specific for Anchorage, how or why are people going to think that the municipal codes and everything else need to be enforced, or should they be enforced? I can foresee that people will try to get around them in any which way they possibly can, simply because if you don't have a license specific to an area that's with changes, then I see it much harder for that to be enforced as well.
I would answer this. Almost every single licensed contractor in Anchorage has worked without a permit. Every licensed one. I've either met with them, almost all of them, I'm telling you.
If you would please, we're going to call this.
I'm just saying.
I'd like to open up for board discussion if we have any further comments. And I'd like to start out by pointing out, we're an hour in, we're on the first item. I don't know how we're going to eat this elephant, but while we're on this topic, Mr. Callan online or any other board members, any other comments on this topic before we move on? Any recommendations or proposals that have you with this?
To the chair, this has been riding on my brain. And Ron, you said that there's going to be this training and everything, and you brought up the fact that the backflow, you derive monies from that. There is no money made there's no check ever been written to the municipality. The money for the training that is done goes to IAPO. I don't know.
We know, Dave, that we donate all of our staff's time to go do that.
Well, no, you didn't hear my question. I said there's not a check that comes to the municipality. Yes, they do.
I don't know, maybe, do you?
I understand what Don is getting at, but no, that would be incorrect. The agreement that we have, the central chapter of IAPMA has with the municipality of Anchorage is the initial checks for the 32-hour classes that I administer Tuesday through Friday goes to central chapter of IAPMA because they paid for my training and they paid for my research that they send me down to Florida every 4 years. But the initial recertification classes that I put on four times a year of $120 per individual, that goes to the municipality of Anchorage.
That goes to the municipality.
Sandra administers that side of it and makes cards for those individuals.
First people, the 32.
That would be the initial course, because they're the ones that provide the training for me.
Also, continuing education, on the Bachelor of Prevention, we pay, as I'm certified.
Correct,
That
that Tuesday
goes to
through Friday,
the
the 32
So
hour.
the initial training.
Correct.
Okay.
Is IAPMA, okay.
For a 2-year license,
That's right.
$120.
Yeah.
I stand corrected.
Board comments or discussion?
I don't know how to proceed on this. We're supposed to do an amendment, like what would the assembly like to see from us on these?
Well, I'm not at 11, but that would, I guess that's a good question. I mean, if you were to vote, someone makes a motion saying restore these or don't delete them, vote on it. And for this item, we got the results of that. That would be important input for the assembly. Or any tweaks. I mean, that's the cleanest thing, but you know, if there's some things like keep the contractor license and the trade license, get rid of something, maybe that's ridiculous, but I mean, that kind of thing would be helpful. Well, we don't know this stuff, you know, and you guys do. So, and I respect Ron quite a lot, so his opinion is very important.
I mean, I hear a lot of nays here. Like I said, I don't really have a problem if you have a vote and you just say, no, don't put it in. We will prepare the documents for the assembly with it out. We'll take that out, do an estimation, whatever. We're going to respect what you do. There's nothing in here that we're going to try to like override and try to fight. We're presenting things that we think might be a possibility. If the industry and you guys feel not, we're fine with that. So, I mean, to me, it's very simple. I mean, it's, if you heard enough here that says no, then leave it out. The municipality's not, I mean, we're not gonna be too awful sad that we're gonna keep getting $560,000. I mean, but I don't think it's necessary, but it's not gonna worry me.
Well, to the chair, to that point, do we think we've had enough conversation on it? Is it worth putting to a vote at this point?
I can throw something out there, but I haven't heard from Mr. Cowling on it, but I throw a motion at least, and then we can go into debate on the motion.
I should also let you know, Mr. Hickle does have his hand up again.
I hesitate because for an hour now, and I hesitate because if we continue talking about it, we could fill the entire night talking about this one topic. So what I'd like to do is entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to have board's position on this to maintain contractor and individual trades licensing as it is currently, except to reduce the individual trades license to the processing costs to assess the annual updates of that license. Right. Or biannual, whatever the
You would just want us to calculate the cost and put a fee associated with that cost.
Correct.
True cost.
Commiserate with actual, yes, good words, commiserate with actual costs of renewing. Oh, thank goodness this is recorded. Good. Renewing those lives.
All right, what's the first thing, so, board?
I will second the motion.
Open it up for board discussion. I can, having listened to the discussion, I can see how we could still have, I could see how we could still have enforcement of the code as observed by the municipality of Anchorage without a contractor licensing fee or a tradesperson licensing fee. It was because in order to get a permit, you would still have to have a state license, and that would still be something that would be vetted by the municipality. So that would handle it on the contractor side of things. As far as the trade person side of things, you still would be subject to the inspection process as normal. Now, what I see that being, the one thing I see that being a potential burden is upon the inspector process, and upon the inspectors. They may end up working with people who, at least in the immediate future, aren't as familiar with the code amendments as the municipality of Anchorage practices. Therefore, they may come across more things that are, it's the potential that you come across more people who are less familiar with that and therefore not abiding by them. But that would still have an opportunity to get caught via the inspection process. And the one potential that I see there is that it would have an additional burden on the inspectors. But I can see how it would work. I would say that I am in favor of keeping the language as it was presented in the memorandum, with the caveat that we do ensure that the clause affecting enforcement is adequately stricken, that there's nothing in there that restricts the municipality from enforcing the code. That being said, as kind of because there is so much heat on both sides of the conversation, I think I'm in favor of the proposal this motion at hand, as kind of a, let's look at it, let's reduce the fees. We don't have to get rid of them altogether, because it does sound like there is some potential burden on the municipality associated with vetting the licensing process through the state. So basically, with all that said, I think that I am in favor of this particular motion.
To the chair, so I understand this, you're saying that we only need one contractor's license, a state contractor's license, don't need the municipal contractor's license.
I don't believe that's what the motion is supporting right now. Right now, the motion is saying to strike this language, basically pull this out of the proposed ordinance.
So that
will stay as they are, with the exception of production.
So that the contractor, with the state contract license, could go and just hire a licensed journeyman plumber to do his plumbing and his mechanical. No, you would still be required to have a contractor license. And you would still require a mechanical administrator's license.
As the motion is currently worded, there would be no change from what is currently in place.
All we're doing is we're dropping one contractor's license.
We're dropping the fees for
the fees for the municipal contractor's license.
The
individual, the gas fitter, plumber, sheet metal. The company itself will stay the same, it's just the 175 journeyman's license personally paying.
It's okay. With that, I would be in favor of that because it's saving $400. Because I've been paying for the state and the municipality. I don't see where that's gonna, so then a state contractor's license would supersede, if we just do away with the municipal contractor's license.
That's not what we're proposing right now. Right now, the motion on the table is to leave the system as it is, unchanged, with the exception of reducing fees for individuals.
Oh, okay. I'm missing something. And then municipality, we're out of money, and then we're gonna reduce the fees even more. I don't understand that, but I don't know. What am I missing here?
Do you understand that the motion on the table right now is to pull out that portion of the ordinance, so licensing will stay as it is today, unchanged, except with the exception of reducing licensing fees for individuals.
Well, we still don't know, we haven't done a certain analysis of what it costs to actually issue those licenses. Retirements and wage there, Sandra. I don't know how we can, were we just gonna look at it?
We've asked the municipality to do an analysis of what that would cost.
And then now,
change that
okay, so there's nothing as stone yet. They're gonna-
Not as far as what the final fee.
I think if we're operating at a loss, it's actually, once they do the analysis, they're gonna see that it's actually costs more money. We're gonna need more money for the administrator, but that's what they want to look at. I guess that's a place to start. So we really know that the dollar amount of what it's costing to administrate this. So that's what the motion on the floor right now is.
Correct.
And we have to decide.
Yeah or nay?
So so we were told it was $280,000 per year is what the licensing fees currently
Generate.
annually is 280, right? But it's 560 every 2 years.
Yeah,
Not.
it all varies, right? It varies up and down depending on the year, but it's 560 or so over 2 years. So
Is there any rough order magnitude guess of how much of that is the individual licenses versus the
it's probably 80% contract,
80% contractor?
probably.
So,
I mean,
Oh.
I would think, I don't know.
so
Through the chair, I think that the number is actually closer to 600 grand a year licensing revenue brings in
600 per year.
per year.
Okay, so, but even if that's 80%,
I have the numbers.
so Mr. McCann, what we're proposing is that still stays there. 80% of the revenue that is generated from the contractor. So your particular company, it'll be the $400 that you normally pay.
Okay, so
Still stays there,
Or
but,
any contractor.
or any, yeah, mechanical, electrical, every contractor has to do the 400, which is equal across the trades. That still stays there. However, the license that you individually have as a plumber gas fitter at 175 for a journeyman.
I think it's 200 because the plumbing contractor card or sheet metal contractor is 400. So I think the journeymans are half of that amount.
Okay, so that would end up getting reduced down to just how much it costs for them to renew it. I'm gonna throw a dart and say $40. So that revenue would be reduced down, but that's, I'm gonna throw another dart and say $40,000 less revenue versus the 280/600/ whatever this number is. So a slight revenue.
Okay. We can look at it.
Mr. Callahan, do you have any comments?
Did you say Mr. Cowling?
We did.
Yes, sir. Want to make sure you have a comment if desired.
I am extremely torn on this. I see the benefit of it, and I'm living in different states over my life and experiencing working as an electrician in California. we had a state license and I could go anywhere in the state and work. And I would have not enjoyed having to get a license in each one of the cities that I had to go to. The union I was in covered several cities and up to 100 miles away. So I'm putting myself in the electrician's frame of mind here that he has to, get this this extra license in Anchorage if he lives in the Valley. Does anyone know if the Valley or Fairbanks or Juneau, any other city require a city licensing?
I thought I heard Fairbanks, or
Okay.
Fairbanks is contemplated from one plumbing contractor.
I'm seeing a lot of head shaking now.
I'm unaware of Fairbanks Borough municipal licensing requirement, at least for plumbers. I believe Anchorage is the only municipality within the state that requires some license. Is that correct, Lois?
Actually, if I may, a couple of weeks ago, actually, it's probably been 3 weeks, we had an individual that moved up from Fairbanks into here, and he had to show proof of experienced hours of on-the-job training. And city of Fairbanks does have municipal testing and certification requirements for the plumbers.
Is there a fee associated with the test and license?
I believe so.
Yeah. The other thought I'm hearing about reducing it, I think that sounds great. It does feel a little bit redundant. It feels like when it gets that low, it's going to cost you more to track the $40 and try to collect that than that's probably worth. I was searching online to see if it's still that an electrician can work anywhere, for instance, in the state of California, with just a California license, and the answer was it looks like that all you need is a state license and you can work in any city. However, I can tell you that the difference in levels of inspection and the protection that it provides in Anchorage, when I hire a contractor in Anchorage, I feel completely at ease that the work's going to get done correctly and there's an inspector going to come around and make sure that it's right. And I don't have to be involved and worry about it. When I have work done in California or Arizona on any of the places I own, I'm a nervous wreck. There's no one that comes and checks it. So that puts me to the other side where I like the fees and I like the licensing. So I can say that I've never been more torn on a subject in my life. So I'm not much help at pushing this one way or the other right now.
Okay. I understand some folks online do have comments. I am going to stick with moving forward because I do want to be able to move forward. I thank everybody who has talked. Before we go on this, my comment would be I'm very much in favor of streamlining things, and coming into this, I was all in favor of removing these. I'm very surprised to hear that there is such wide support for the licensing. And that has convinced me, for now, let's keep it. And this is a topic that I'd be happy to hear more on. I'd be happy to hear more from the folks you alluded to who were not able to make it tonight. It would be good to hear more from both sides of this, but from what I hear today, it's pretty cut and dry that there's a reason for them, they serve a benefit, and I support the motion. Any final comments before we put this to vote?
Just one more thing, Mr. Chair. Can we, can we reduce the contractor licensing as well? I mean, is that, it seems, well, all of this is starting to feel a little arbitrary, but it seems odd that we would lower the individual fee, but not the contract.
I can speak to that. The reason why I was proposing the individual was because where the money is, basically. The contractors on the larger that aren't like Mr. McCann's just himself, the company you work for instance, makes a lot more money than you individually. And so I see it as less of a burden on the company than I'm mindful of an individual person, you know, $175 for an individual is a lot more of a personal impact than $400 on the company. That's why I was that's why I was proposing to reduce the individual's impact on all of the actual tradespeople, while maintaining revenue from corporations that are frankly making profit from the tradesperson's work. This is why I was. No, seeing that there is a request in the industry to actually reduce the burden on contractors, I think that that's a really good.
I think it should be half price myself. I think instead of 400, I think this should only be 200 for the company. Personally, I've been doing licensing for years. I've been doing 20 years, and I don't think that the individual should take less of a burden than the company. The company, you know, has a lot more burden, I think, and I personally feel that a company should have their fees reduced too.
Any more comments or discussion? I would like to see a rider that we reduce the contractor licensing as well. As the second, you can put in the amendments. All right. So,
I mean, recognizing that we had that discussion about revenue, and we are laying people off, and we do have a large debt. This is a revenue loss for the city. And that's kind of where the reason why I'm hesitant of lowering the company's cost is because of the revenue loss for the city, knowing that $200,000 is another employee that the building department would have to cut. If you look at it from dollar versus workload, I understand you're doing this based on workload, but I also am hesitant of reducing revenue without the opposite flip side of, say, increasing permit costs or trying to, you know, building safety is supposed to break even every year based on permits and fees and licensing, and they're not. That's why I'm hesitant to $200 a year for a company, which heck, my little tiny engineering budget is not. I will, you know, I'll accept it if the board wants that.
I see hand, but I would like to.
I just want to make it easier. I think it's an incredibly hard sell to the assembly if we don't get rid of the licenses and then reduce it, because it's much harder to prove that we're doing something to hit budget. So I would rather see me just pull this completely out and we don't waste any more time on it, period.
And I'd say that's absolutely your prerogative. All we can do is make our.
So my view is I'm going to pull that out and just leave that out. If we think that we want to bring that forward, we'll bring it forward at another time.
Any further board discussion?
The proposal is what now?
The proposal
Leave
states.
it exactly the same as it is today, because if we change just the fees, it's a much different argument with regard to setting fees and proving fees and identifying all of these things that you guys are trying to do at the assembly level, because we have to do a C. And when we do a C, it can't be based upon speculation. It has to be based on a specific thing. If we reduce the whole licensing thing, then it's much easier to prove that we're not doing anything, we don't get the money. But when we get into the argument of partially doing this, it's not really worth putting forward. I think the inclination is people want to keep the licenses. Let's just leave it alone. I'll pull that out of the amendment and we'll take it out for the assembly ordinance.
Okay. Thank you for that. I would like to vote on our motion that we do have on the table. So,
okay, so point of order or clarification. The motion that we have currently on the table is to leave it as is, but reduce the fees for both individuals and companies is the current motion that we have.
That's correct. That is what we are voting on right now.
Okay.
That is, as a building board, that's our recommendation. What you do with that is up to you, what you do with the ordinance.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
what you can do with the ordinance that has been, or motion that has been proposed, you can vote on that, and then a new motion can be put in saying, take this out and leave it as is. And that's how you could do it for clerical purposes.
So we vote no against the current motion, then we can reintroduce a new motion, then to just
Take it out.
leave it as is and not put forth.
Correct.
On discussion on that point, I would encourage us as a board to keep our motion as it is, so we can put our opinion forth, and again, what you want to do with it, you have different constraints than we do as far as what you're up against. After our discussion, if this is what we decide we want to move forward with, that's the recommendation, that's all it is, a recommendation. So with that, okay. Shannon, I would ask you to call the question.
Okay.
You have to make a decision, Mr. Callen.
Okay. Mr. Freddy,
Yes.
Mr. Sobolewski,
Yay.
Mr. McCann,
Yes.
Mr. Cowling.
Yes.
Okay, that is 4 yeses. Yes. Now. Mr. Strait.
Oh, yes.
All right.
Okay, we have got through an item. I'm going to call a 5-minute recess. There's bathrooms in the corner. Let's take a water break. We'll resume in 5 minutes. Sometimes I guess best to do all of this. It would be nice. That's where let's just.
What's the development?
I got one. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to hear us out. So thank you guys for.
We're gonna hit automatic air vents next, guys. So.
Okay. I have another.
All right, very much. Thank you, John.
All right, what I propose we do is jump ahead to some of the more technical items if there's more discussion on, or in one case, lack of discussion. I'd like to start out with item on GFCIs. As I understand it from Mr. Thompson's write-up, that has been agreed to by him to pull that. From our previous discussion, it sounds like that would also be what would be recommended by this commission.
Are you talking the garage?
The GFCI and ceiling. So I'd like to entertain a motion on the GFCI issue specifically.
I will second it, or I will propose it. I will propose a motion on section 20. Am I reading that right? Regarding the garage door opener GFCI replacement. It's our understanding that this is intended to be withdrawn from the.
Yeah.
From the.
We met with staff and discussed it in length and all of the, I also talked with the state of Alaska, and we all are in agreement. It should have never been in here, it's been included in this package. And it was, and so I immediately agreed that we would take it out.
Okay. Well, then I will propose a motion to strike section 20 from the memorandum.
I would second that.
All right, any discussion on the board? Mr. Callen, anything to add?
Nope. As discussed last time, that's exactly what we were believing should happen.
All right, Tan, would you call the vote?
I will. Mr. Fedin?
Yes.
Mr. Sobolewski?
Yes.
Mr. McCann?
Yes.
Mr. Strick?
Yes.
And Mr. Callen?
Yes.
All right.
That dropped our average down.
2 down. Next up, let's discuss air admittance valves. Mr. Thompson, if you would please present this topic and your opinion on what we should do next.
I think it'd probably be good for Craig, because I've kind of let Craig, as the plumbing committee chairman, look at this, analyze it. I think there's a lot of comments either side. I put this one in to match what I felt was in the IPC. And so what I had said, I'd heard many times over and over and over by many contractors that they wanted to be able to use this opportunity every once in a while. And a lot of times I always felt like it's an opportunity to be used as an alternate means and methods. But I wanted to talk on it, and I put it in because half the country that has IPC adopted uses them. They are put in every day. They're stocked on the shelves here in Anchorage. People are putting them in. They are going in. And all I cared about was making sure that under the right conditions, me as a mechanical engineer, I've never put them in a project. And I think that many engineers and many designers have said that. But there are conditions and places that they would be very good for the situation that we have, and much more easy to make a renovation work. And so what I had asked and why I wanted it in there, and it came in like matching exactly IPC. But what I really, and then it sparked a lot of talk. So I think I'll leave it with that with Craig, because I think Craig, you guys submitted something today as what your final request was maybe. But I've kind of stayed out of that one because I felt that Craig had a good handle on it, and that whatever came forward out of the plumbing code committee would be what we would also follow for moving forward.
I would say, long story short, our work's not done. We have progressed on it. UPC committee has been working on some verbiage that refined and took a lot of the IPC. The IPC was pretty loose. It was very loose in where it can be used, basically everywhere, anywhere. And the UPC committee also recognizes that there are situations that they will be useful and that they are accepted elsewhere in the country. But we also have some climactic things we put in. For instance, they cannot be put in the attic or in a cold wall. They cannot be put into a freezing condition. I know there are valves that are supposedly rated for cold freezing temperatures, but that's not allowed in the current verbiage. We have been deeply debating on exactly where they will be allowed. And we initially started out with some verbiage that was to give it more latitude of quote unquote feasibility and have YARS and the inspectors or Lee Bergstrom have the ability to kind of come in and say something's feasible or not, just construction wise. Way too loosey-goosey on the verbiage. Staff said, please don't do that to us, and I concur, we really don't want to do that to you guys. So right now, and like I said, long story short, I don't have final verbiage to put forward for today. We are close. Right now, we have 2 exceptions where they would be allowed, or 3, or first one is an island vent. This is the sinks that are out in the, in the middle of your kitchen. Yeah, like if this particular table here had a sink, these are, the island vents are kind of a bugger to pipe. Now, that being said, vents have been plumbed in Alaska for the last 40 years, ever since we, there is a way, almost 100% there's a way. Architects may not like it one little bit, might be hideously ugly and everything like that, but there is a way to do it by code every time. But the island fixtures was one of them that was figured that'd be a good application. Another one that was brought out there was if there is a fixture group that not exceeding a total of 4 drainage fixture units of more than 30 feet horizontal radius from another plumbing fixture. So if you are putting one in here and you're way over there 30 feet, we made it horizontal because we basically, the situation we run into is in a tenant improvement. If you're on the first floor and you've got 3 floors above you, you're not going to run a vent up through another tenant space above. And so that was one of the situations where we thought that would be a decent location. 30 feet away horizontally from your nearest fixture or vent would be another acceptable location. The third item that came up, and this came from, we've also been in discussions with the state plumbing inspectors on these things. The third one was renovation work. And that was renovation work except for additions, because if you're doing addition, then you should be able to get through the roof with a normal vent. The renovation one is actually a sticking point in our committee right now because it is such a broad term. If you're doing a renovation, that was, where previous 2 were very specific. This instance, that instance, and then, oh, by the way, any renovation. That has a few of the UPC committee members not liking that. Then the fourth one was the alternate means and methods request, the current way to go through that process. But like I said, our verbiage is not done. I think we still have a lot more outreach to the industry. The consensus from the state of Alaska, and I would say the consensus from the Plumbing Code Committee, is there are instances where these would be valuable in the municipality of Anchorage, but we're very, very, very hesitant of just letting it go crazy wild and being misused. And frankly, it's a mechanical device, and it will eventually spew sewage gases into it. So that's, but I know these gentlemen are here. I'd love to hear from you guys on those areas.
Tonight, or you want to have a meeting sometime? I'm willing to sit down with you guys anytime. Talk about it. I've seen a lot of things out in the valley. I've been to friends' houses where they're doing a renovation out there and open up a wall and their admittance valves and a wall space enclosed. I mean, how's it getting air into it? I mean, it's an enclosed wall. They're not to be enclosed anyways. Again, sewage gas, cold weather temperature. The island vents, I mean, they're 245s in the 90. It's in the code book. You put a foot vent in. That's an island vent. Put it below the flood level rim of the sink. If you have a backup, where's it going to go? It's going to go into the cabinet. and stuff like that. I mean, to me, codes is for safety, health and welfare of the people, not cutting corners so that we can cut costs for construction. That's the way I feel these air emissions are. That's trying to cut the cost of construction. You're not taking them as the safety. My thought on it.
So, through the chair, so your position is just not at all in any situation?
If the HJ, in our code book, it says the HJ has the authority. If there is a special situation that there's no other way around it, I don't see that. They have it in the code. There is a set procedure how to do an island. Yeah, it sucks. It's more fittings, it's more pipe, everything else. But it's in there for a reason. I don't know. There might be other things, but I've seen some fairly shady things out in the valley with them. You know, said there's things in Home Depot and Lowe's, you know, they're on the shelf. Just because they're on the shelf doesn't mean they're legal. There's a lot of stuff in Home Depot and Lowe's in the plumbing section. I can go in there and show you. It ain't legal. It ain't even listed, some of it. So, I mean, that's my take on it.
So you have other, I fully agree with Jason here. Safety, been in a lot longer than I have. I fortunately haven't seen any of these in action, but all I can see is picturing it underneath the sink, behind cabinets is as soon as the dishwasher backs up, something else you're flooding it all over the floor of your kitchen. You want to say you want to add it in a renovation. How much money does the renovation cost? As soon as that backs up, now you just wreck the whole cost of your renovation. Safety.
And who's responsible? If it backs up, that was the installation. Who's responsible for the cleanup of it? Mold mitigation, damages incurred. Is the contractor that installed it responsible? Is the inspector that inspected it responsible? Or who's responsible?
I would, echo Mr. Thompson. My 25 years, I've never done it. So. And I'm not wanting to.
I haven't seen them in that group, but I see a lot of them in the valley.
If I may, through the chair, to add, as far as the island venting, you're already getting out there with that waste piping. What's called a foot vent, you're returning with that foot vent at a higher elevation, either on top of the floor or below that floor, within the same wall, floor joist space. So then you'll go back and you'll tie into an existing vent above that flood rate. So that's simply to achieve. But I guess I do have a question for you guys. Along with the plumbing committee, we're still waiting to hear some example. Is there particular installation exceptions in a way to where we feel that device would sufficiently function? That kind of would be good to hear. So we'd like to hear some more feedback from whomever that would be able to get involved. Because there may be certain circumstances where it would function, maybe a single fixture, fixture unit, single fixture unit lab, or not something that exceeds a certain amount of fixture units, but and install proper installation and elevation, it may function, So, but yes, there are some exceptions in various code throughout the country. So we're just looking for some feedback and some ideas to take this forward.
Since we're not in a position tonight to finalize our recommended verbiage for automatic air valves, so I want to be mindful of the time of the board. I would like to figure out a way that we can get local 367 together. Get this. I don't know if you guys have meetings.
I'm the training coordinator over at the Union Hall. Contact me anytime, and I'm willing to
guys want to have a meeting to set up a meeting and have people show up at it, we get, because right now, like, Tony Jones is online right now. Tony is on, UPC committee. We have a few contractors on that committee. But I don't want to leave any stone unturned on this because it is a significant change. We are here to protect the public. So,
Chair,
yes, sir.
does anybody even know what they look like?
I would love to play with that thing.
These are all over, they're in Colorado, they're in Washington, they're in Arizona. And it actually, in the right installation, under a kitchen cabinet, in a cabinet, they're readily acceptable. And I see what you're saying about backing up. There's a problem with probably this gasket emitting some gas, but it's threaded inside, and you can change it. And they're not only used; they're going into new construction, into construction sites. Arizona, Colorado, I see them. I've got pictures of them. Yards have brought up the fixture load requirement. I agree with, but everybody's for labs. They're putting them under in cabinets on labs, and you see them in all the just about every kitchen, under every kitchen sink, on an island vent. I stand correct. It's on an island vent. Makes it so much easier instead of going back that way. So there must be, they've done enough research in a readily accessible application. They're doing it all over. I mean, I don't see a problem with them. That you brought up some very good things about oven and attic. I don't know who would do that. That's the value. And there's things like that for remodeling. It could get out of hand. Yes, they are sold. I bought these at a supply house, and they did enough research on them to where they must work. Okay, I personally myself, a 50-year plumber this year, I have never put one in. When I see them at $500,000 to $800,000 homes, they must in these different states. There must be something to them. They're pretty simple. I would be okay with putting them in an island vent on a remodel, but these are going into new homes.
I look at safety of the people compared to a contractor cutting their costs.
But as long as the contractor would give the savings back to the home.
Put it this way, if you're cutting costs and you're having a safety issue, what happens if somebody gets sick or dies?
Yeah. I don't see it as a safety issue.
This is an IAPO versus IPC type deal. They're approved in IPC 100%, and they're not in IAPO in the UPC that we adopt. That's really what it is. They're put in any state, any city that has IPC, they go in, like you say, they're offered rent. The building code says that we're supposed to. There's nothing in the code that's supposed to prevent listed alternatives, items, and equipment. You're not supposed to be able to prevent people from using accepted devices. This is a certified accepted device, and that's why this went in. I don't see it as the safety issue. And then when I hear, oh, it's a mechanical device, well, almost everything we put in as a mechanical engineer is a mechanical device. Every single thing we put in can fail, and they do fail, and we replace them. And so this is the same thing. It's one of those things. Things fail. I've seen plumbing, I've seen regular plumbing back up and overflow and do the same thing that we cause. I've seen venting that has broken. I've seen all of those things. It's just another option. And even UPC has these, they do have a form, they're certified by UPC, but not listed by CDC, whatever that is.
They don't have a full listing.
Yeah, it's some kind of weird certification. I never understand how you spend money with an organization and get it certified And then that organization says, you really can't use it anywhere our code is good, but they take the money for the certification.
What the partial listing means, since we're on that, is basically it leaves the other side to the authority having jurisdiction. And here, you know, in the municipality of Anchorage, we've got a memorandum and an agreement of a letter of understanding with the municipality of Anchorage and the state of Alaska that we don't adopt a lesser standard than the UPC. So that's the minimum standard that we have. The UPC most certainly doesn't have exceptions for these types of devices as of now. That I've shared that with everyone.
I would say that in discussions with the lead plumbing inspector with the state of Alaska, none of his inspectors would allow that. So of course, you guys also know that the state plumbing inspectors, there's 2 for the entire state. They aren't exactly breaking doors down doing inspections. But he did tell me that if any of his guys ever find one on the job site, they're red tagging it and say, no, take it off. He didn't object to us going forward with them as long as we put significant restrictions on them that addressed climate and also made sure it just wasn't a pure profit only thing. And I would say no one's selling a home for $450 less than $600,000 because they saved money on the fence. That's something I find funny on some of this stuff is there's no savings to the owner. But I would request that this item be taken back off the table. I go back, I work with you guys and get more information, and then hopefully the next, we're obviously not getting done. Hopefully the next one will have some approved verbiage. And I also need to circle back with the state plumbing inspector as well and make sure he's not going to show up with a tank in front of my door or something. All of a sudden take a long inspection.
Remember, the deferment says, as a whole, as everything with regard to codes, you have to be as restrictive as them. It doesn't say every single item specific to this, because we can you look at things in general. I mean, there's a lot of things. They have different amendments than us. We have many amendments that are different than theirs in their code. To judge whether one's safer or less safe or less stringent, more stringent, we usually never get into that argument with them, but we deal with them every day. I talked with the electrical lead today about the garage and about those things. And so, I mean, we do build the rapport, we do care, we work together. I met with the fire marshal a couple weeks ago on things. So believe me, we work with them too. And I respect that the committee is doing their best for an issue to decide what we can and can't do. And if the end is that it's only building officials can do it by alternate means and methods, then that's the language that we'd like to see. What's been happening is it's just been blanketly said, no, never, no opportunity, no alternate means and methods, no nothing. And therefore we feel that there should be that option to be able to use it as an alternate means and methods or with specific restrictions. So I think what Craig's doing is exactly what we'd like to see. And in the end, we should have a good product and a good restriction that allows good enforcement, but the possibility to maybe use it here and there. Like Craig, I don't know if I'd ever put one in for sure, but there might be a situation that we run into that we would. I just don't know yet. I haven't run into it.
All right, well, we'll propose to table this item. I support that. Then we'll come back to this once. There's enough discussion on this, and obviously there's something here. Like you say, there's cause for it. There's something that we can do to improve this, and I look forward to seeing the recommendation on that. All right, I propose we step next into, let's see, the other item that was mentioned by gentleman from IUPW on the line was the LED lights. So let's go back to that topic. So that was item number 4. We discussed this as a board last time, and it, for the time, settled on a negative response to that, but we did not have a good feel for why it was proposed, and felt there was more discussion to be had. So I'd like to have that discussion now. Mr. Thompson, would you like to start the discussion?
And basically, my wording stands alone. Basically, I've been asked many times, numerous times, that if there's no wire change out, you're just changing 3 wires out with a new fixture. Why would we need to get a permit for that? We typically don't for individuals. Like if we do, like if somebody comes in and does 2 lights, we don't need a permit right today, right? But if you did the whole room, multiple, then they need a permit. And everybody knows that LEDs are about 25% of the load. The wiring is obviously takes a lesser load. All of those things come into play. And we already have other ones, like I mentioned, that in the recent past, plumbing has many, but they also have the replacement of electric water heater in single-family duplex dwellings, provided such replacement does not involve requiring replacement or rearranging of piping and plumbing, and as well as the, so the whole thing is we're replacing things with no wiring changes. Do we really need to get permits for that? And I mean, it's a philosophy issue with regard to that in a renovation, if we're going to do a full renovation, they're going to get an electrical permit because they're going to do outlets and all of that as well. But we're talking just for doing light fixture changeouts, which are going on. Right now, if you do two or 1 or 3 in a building, I don't think they require the permit, but if you're doing multiple, they're saying you got to go get a permit. And so we don't feel like it's unsafe, but it's trying to match up with all the other things you can change. You can change out hose bib, drinking fountains, sink slabs, electric water heaters, all the other things, as long as you're not changing anything. So do we need that in there? I don't think we do. I think that's a big industry right now, changing from regular fluorescents to LEDs. And if they're not is it going to come into play that often? No, not unless they exactly replace like for like sizing and everything. But if they do and they don't have to require wiring, we're saying we think it's like these other exemptions, and so just follow that. But we're open to whatever you guys think.
Okay. Thank you. To reiterate, as I recall, the concerns that were raised last time is when you have, say, in a room like this, some of these are going to have seismic bracing that's above and beyond what the average installer might know. If you're not doing a permit, you might not understand that, as well as emergency lighting has additional wires. So just want to put that out there to frame the discussion. And then we'd like to open up both to the board and the folks online for discussion on this topic. Mr. Cullen, looks like you're.
Yeah, I'd like to address from my point of view, as you mentioned, the first part that I feel like the inspectors need to come by and the installer needs to feel like somebody's going to come back and check them is it's a pain to take the seismic wires off and put them back on the new fixture. And if no one's watching, that tends to not get accomplished. The next part is the replacement fixtures. Many times when it's not going to be inspected, a replacement fixture that is replacing the fixtures in this room, for instance, above your head there, that appears to me to be a return air fixture. The fixture replacement guys, that fixture costs $100 more probably than just a simple flat panel replacement. So they go through and they take out the fixtures. These guys that are just swapping fixtures out don't know the impact of losing all the return air. So it has impacts with the air quality. The wiring changes is what happens is that they just go in and they count the fixtures and they don't realize that there's emergency lights built into, or emergency batteries built into a certain number of the fixtures many times. So they just come in and they rewire it, not realizing that it's really that important that this unit doesn't have a battery. So then you've lost or it's not being inspected to make sure and verify that the new fixture has the emergency battery in it. Also, there's many different performance levels of the emergency fixtures that you'd swap them out for. So if there's not an engineer involved specifying the capacity of the emergency light, the illumination that it provides and the spacing and the quantity, and that's just left to the installer that's swapping these out. Well, that unit can cost easily another $100 more for the battery unit. Those won't get installed if there's no one inspecting them, in my opinion, many times. And then the last one is, I experienced this with this exact condition. It turns out you can buy fixtures from Alibaba for $24, and they look like a fixture. They have a UL listing on them, but yet when you track it down and call UL about the fixture, it's not even UL listed. And I experienced that one myself. And the reason I checked it was the owner of the building said, I bought a whole pallet of fixtures and they're great and they're only $24. And I said, I'd like to see this. And when he brought it over, I saw the UL listing on it, and it kind of really, took the steam out of me on pushing back on him. But one of my employees said, I'm going to call UL. And I said, I think you're right, because I've never seen wire routed on the outside of a light fixture like this. So let's do it. Well, it was a counterfeit light fixture. So if we don't have inspectors coming to check for these items, I don't know what you're going to get in these ceilings, but there's a whole lot of ways to mess that one up, in my opinion. So I would not recommend that shortcut or that reduction in effort or complication of their lives. I think it's warranted for all those reasons. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I really respect Eric on his opinion. We changed the garage one based on that. So I can definitely just, based on what he said, there's no reason to talk anymore. I agree with him based upon the few items that he mentioned. There's no reason to leave this one in there.
Okay, I would like to know that we have again, our gentleman from IPW online who had his hand raised. I would like to hear your input on this.
Yes, thank you, sir. Yeah, not to belabor the issue, but I would agree with the gentleman who just spoke. I also share concerns with someone untrained, and specifically not having an inspector getting eyes on those replacements for all of the reasons that were mentioned. In addition to, there is another current code requirement in the National Electrical Code for a device that would disconnect a ballast or a driver for a light fixture. And that's to make it safer for an individual to change those ballasts or drivers. And so if we don't have an installer who's aware of those requirements, and we don't have an inspector coming behind to check to make sure that those things are being done according to the code, that really presents a significant shock hazard for someone coming in behind and trying to change out those ballasts or drivers. So agreed, I would not support this sort of an exemption for retrofits. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Sounds like I'd like to entertain a motion. This one is, I'll propose a motion to strike section 4 from the memorandum.
I second it.
All right, any discussion? Tanner, would you do the honors?
Certainly. Mr. Cowling,
Yes.
Mr. Fredine,
Yes.
Mr. Sobolewski,
Yes.
Mr. McCann,
Yes.
and Mr. Straight.
Yes.
All right.
All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. It's another one down. Before I pick another one at random, is there any other of these topics that you folks in the room that are attending from the public or online are here specifically to talk about? I want to make sure to get your input.
I have no more. Those are the two subjects I was making. I would like to get assistance on this information and we'll get with it.
Anybody online have anything you'd like to address specifically? Hearing none, I propose we next dive into items 21, 22, 23, the IFC driveway changes. I recall we did see a letter from Fire Marshal. I believe we saw some documentation come through on this. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Thank you.
I can explain on that, both the DCM and the MOA driveway standards already address this and have already been made change. And this is just to correct and make it match the road standards that are out there. So the road DCM already changed from 10% to 12%, and same way with driveways. And so the fire marshal, the fire chief, municipal engineer, traffic engineer who deal with those issues. But all agreed and all made that change. But what happens is it is in the IFC, and so therefore we had to change it in the IFC as well. But it's already in effect. It's already out there in the other arenas where it's normally looked at. So we just fixed it here. This was suggested and given to me by Mark Pinello. The language was by the fire marshal. So the language that went in the code is from the fire department.
Excellent, thank you. Any other discussion on this topic? Hearing none, I'd like to get a motion on this.
I make a motion that the board supports the proposed change.
I will second. Excellent. Any further board discussion? Hearing none. Tanner?
Mr. Cowley,
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes.
Mr. Fredine,
Yes.
Mr. Sobolewski,
Yes.
Mr. McCann,
Yes.
and Mr. Straight.
Yes. Very much. Motion carries. While we're in a motion-making mood, I would like to also go back to all the ones that we as a board had discussed last time and agreed with. I propose that we clarify all that with a motion to support our agreement from last time, to make it official to the common paperwork. So that would have been Section 8, expiration of plan review, Section 9, expiration of permit, Section 14, onsite fees, Section 16, modification of ASC 7 correction, Section 17 on special inspection pre-approval program correction, and Section 18 silent stop categories D through F correction. All those are listed in our notes as discussed and approved by the board last time around. I believe that covered all the ones that fall on that topic. I'd like to entertain a motion to make official our agreement with those.
I'll make a motion that the board supports the proposed changes of Section 8, expiration of plan review, Section 9, expiration of permit, Section 14, on-site fees, Section 16, modification to ASC 7 correction, Section 17, special inspection pre-approval program correction, and Section 18, seismic design categories D through F correction.
I will second. All right, any discussion? Very good. Okay.
Mr. Cowley,
Ooh, I was having trouble finding that mute. I agree.
Mr. McCann,
Yes.
Mr. Sobolewski,
Yes.
Mr. Fredine,
Yes.
and Mr. Straight.
Yes.
All right.
You go in a different order every time, don't you? Something's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. I don't believe I've ever voted on so much in one night in this board meeting, so.
I did want to mention one section that we're removing, Section 25. As looking further in that, I feel like it's an issue for alternate means and methods only. And I believe the law is written that already allows that, so there's no reason for Section 25. So we're pulling Section 25 out of this. If that, hopefully that helps you not have to deal with one of the others.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate that. Shall we give this one the same treatment?
I will make a motion to strike Section 25, allow unventilated hot roof construction for buildings regulated by the IRC.
I'll second that.
Memorandum.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Tana?
Mr. Cowley,
I agree.
Mr. McCann,
I agree.
Mr. Sobolewski,
Yes.
Mr. Fredine,
Yes.
and Mr. Straight.
Yes.
All right.
All right. I feel like we've made something like progress. I will now open up the board to, does anybody have any topics specifically they'd like to address next out of this list?
In the interest of time, I would like to propose a motion to table the remaining sections that
decided upon. All right, we have a motion.
I'll second.
All right, and for discussion, I just want to read through what still remains to make sure we're all on the same page. Still remaining is section 3 on increased monetary threshold when permits are required for specific work. We did section 4, section 5 on temporary structures, section 6, 10, and 12 on residential permit fee revisions for projects valued at 40,000 or less. Section 7 on provisions to audit residential projects that have not undergone municipal plan review. Section 24. Section 19 we already tabled, so we've got that one already taken care of. Section 24 on IRC change to delete the requirements for 1 hour ADU separation. Section 26 to delete the requirement for sound attenuation for accessory dwelling units and the conversion of single family to duplex. So those are the remaining items that have not been discussed today. Does anybody see any reason to address any of those tonight? I see a hand up. I cannot read the name.
Mr. Hickle.
Mr. Hickle. Would you like to say something? You're on.
Thank you. Sound attenuation and fire separation kind of go hand in hand when we're talking about two-family dwellings. The IRC is very clear about two-family dwellings. They don't specifically spec out an ADU, but in the paperwork that was given by the administration, they're saying this is a nationwide trend, and indeed it is. This nationwide trend is ultimately to eliminate single-family homes. And the foot in the door is this amendment to eliminate the fire and sound separation in a single-family home to an ADU. And on the East Coast, it is rampant. It's easily searchable on the internet. I found hundreds of articles about this, about getting rid of the zoning code, which is the next step to allow these throughout the nation. And essentially, they start with the ADU, and they introduce the junior ADU, which is essentially a efficiency type apartment. So now you have 3 dwelling units on a single family home. And then they turn around, because there is no zoning code, because that's the next step. And you have condos on a single family home. So now we could potentially have 6 families living on a single family lot with no parking requirements because zoning's been eliminated. And we have 6 vehicles on the street. So this proposal is the foot in the door, for lack of a better term, to get to this point where coming to a neighborhood near you, an ADU, and we're in apartment living again, gentlemen. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hickle. I appreciate your input. That, to me, lends credence to the motion that we do not have time tonight to talk through all there is to these issues.
Can I ask you real quick, how late do you normally meet and how much time do you have? Because the one nice thing about the last time was having the document that you guys had, so I could respond to it and use staff to get you back information about that, or meet with staff and decide, or ask the industry what's that, so I could eliminate a few of these. We've eliminated a few of these and talked about them. And so I was hoping that a couple of them more that we could get through, so I know what to go work on, rather than coming back in a month and then spending an hour and a half, and then all of a sudden we delay again to January. You know what I mean? We need to get this moving and get it finished. And I'm hoping for sure that we can get done with the UPC soon. But the other ones, I was hoping that we could get a little bit of, at least the ones that seem to be simple and maybe got an answer to over with, so we can focus on a few of the others, or where you guys didn't like the answer that we gave, that I can go back to staff and talk more about it, because I feel like I've worked really hard with staff, fire department, Ross had some on the sound attenuation in the 1 hour for ADUs. He had a good solution for that. I believe that, and then some of these other, the temporary structures is so simple, the residential fee things is simple, those things are, and so I just wanted to get a feel for if we need to go back to the drawing board. I don't want to take months and months and keep coming back. We want to get these codes forward. They've been in the assemblies workflow for quite some time, and John, you guys keep delaying them, right? Is that what's going on right now? Why we go through this process? You never set a public hearing, is that what's?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so there's no public hearing set, but it's in their workflow, so it's staying in under old business or whatever. At some point it'll be.
Not on our agenda, it doesn't go way out.
Okay. But I mean, why I say another month, we have all the planning meetings. We're doing this with a bunch of Title 21 changes. We're going to planning board and going back to P&Z the first or second week in December. And so we're hoping that we can get through this by around that first part of December, and then get going and get these things adopted, so we can get past, we can get these fees, the ones that have the due fees, by January 1st. I mean, I don't know if we can make that, but we're trying to, so we can get a lot of these changes made so they go in at the beginning of a year rather than middle of the year. And I just don't know how late you guys normally meet, so that's why I was asking.
To that question, we typically don't go late. We typically have meetings that are 2 hours at most. We're not nearly as brave as our friends on the assembly. At this point, I believe, my understanding is that if we table these for today, we would be again in approximately 2 weeks.
Oh, that'd be great. If we can do that, then that works. I just didn't want to go month to month to month. If we go 2 weeks and then 2 weeks, that works for me, and that's perfect for our moving forwards.
Excuse me, one moment. The next meeting would be December 2nd, which would be a normal meeting date. And at the same time.
It's only like 7.
Yeah, that works for me. I mean, you guys understand some of what we do is time constricted, and there's a lot of work to do after this and still work through the assembly. And so we're trying to make sure that, I mean, the whole point here is trying to go forward with an ordinance that we all can support. I mean, and I think that's what's been going on. It seems like it's pretty good give and take on what's going on, and we're going to get there, I think.
All right, before we take action on this motion, Mr. Hickel, I see you have your hand raised. Do you have a comment on what we discussed tonight versus you'll comment on the motion, I should say.
Yes, I do. I think due to the significance of making this change, this should be more of a vote to the people, and then instead of a amendment to the International Residential Code. This is such a drastic change.
Mr. Hickel, are you talking about this decision to table for further discussion, or are you talking about a different topic?
I'm sorry, I'm talking about items 24 and 26.
Okay, and what the motion on the table right now is to table that discussion for our next meeting in 2 weeks.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Further discussion? And that's an excellent point. We do not have a good representation from our folks who are most up to speed on the ADU topic specifically. Mr. Boney. All right.
I believe you got 4 more new members that have been voted through. We got to get them here and get them educated. 3 more because Craig was already. But yeah, we need to get them there and get training here. So whoever, and get them for the next meeting if you can.
They do need to get sworn in. And I gotta get their contact information, so I can let them know that there's a meeting.
All right, hearing no more discussion, can I get a call, motion on the table? And to confirm, the motion on the table is to table the remainder of the discussion for next meeting.
Correct. And Mr. Sapolsky, motion? Mr. Kadim, second?
Call,
Call
call the question, thank you.
All in favor of ending the meeting?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Okay, so that closes out our old business section. Reports, I believe you gave a very good report at the beginning of the meeting, so unless there's anything else that needs to be reported, all good. Board member comments? Hearing none, I'm in it for another 3.
Yeah.
Do I have a move to adjourn?
I will move to adjourn.
All right, second. With that, we are done. Thank you guys very much for your time. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys.
Really appreciate all the input.
Can we just put this back tomorrow?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm gonna, notice a permit requirement posted in your office.
Uh-oh.
Just-
Is it